Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today a very special guest, Chief Shannon Stone, out of the beautiful state of Florida in the Panhandle. Chief, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
This is cool. I've been wanting to have you on for quite some time. And I always like to try to open with a story about my first interaction with a guest or how I got to know them or met them for the first time. You and I have only crossed paths, I think, 2 or 3 times in over the years that I've been doing this. And so on. And I know you've been on other podcasts, and you're a student of the game for sure. We were just talking about that. But my interactions with you have been just top shelf conversations. And the first go around we were down in Texas at a conference many years ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting there doing a round table. You and a couple other guys were up on the stage. We were in a bar, probably about 60 people sitting there listening to us, right? I think it was like the opening event for the conference, and I don't even know if you remember this or not, but this is a great story that I share with a lot of people. And our first interaction was you made a comment to a guy. A kid stood up in the crowd, and he says, we were doing question and answer, and the kid stands up in the crowd, and he says, hey, I'm a young fireman. I've only been a fireman for about 5-6 years. I'm paraphrasing. And he says, our fire district is growing so fast that we're opening up firehouses so quickly that they want me to become a lieutenant at the station down the road that they're opening. And he goes, I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm qualified. I don't think I have enough time in or experience, and yet they're pushing me to do this, and I'm conflicted and confused as to how I should go about it. And I, first off, was blown away. And this is what I love about this younger generation. They're not afraid to ask questions, which is wild, right? Because 30 years ago for me, I would have never stood up in a room full of my peers and said that ever. I would have never have asked that question, right? And he's looking for guidance. He's looking for somebody to help him along the way. And you address him and you go, okay. He's like, that's cool. He goes, well, you said to him, if not you, then who? And I just stood there and I was like, I go, wait a minute, let's get into this. And I go, Chief, what do you mean? And you said, well, listen, you're here giving up your time on a weekend to be here. You're asking the questions. You want to better yourself. That tells me that you are the type of individual that will push. You're a self-starter. You want to be better. You want to make your department better. You're here pushing yourself on your time, probably on your dime. He goes, why wouldn't we want you there? If you don't have anybody else that's qualified and they think that your peers think that you're qualified, your command staff, your officers, your mentors think you're qualified, and they want you in that seat, then why not you? You might not have all the experience. You might not have all the street smarts, but if you go in with an open mind knowing that you don't have all the answers, you can be successful at this. So you just said to him, if not you, then who? And that really resonated with me, and that was my first impression of you. And when I sat back after that whole conference, that's the only thing that really stood out to me as like just a strong nugget from left field that came in. And Chief, I have to say, I was really impressed by you from that moment forward. And to be honest, I was a little intimidated by you too. I mean, come on, tough guy, tatted up, beach guy, I love it. But I was like, man, this guy's hardcore. So it took me a little while to reach out and make the connection, but I love it. So thank you for being here. But talk to me a little bit about that. Do you remember that moment?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I actually do. Yeah, it was a cool little bar. We were hanging out.
Yeah.
Me, you, and golly, I'm drawing a blank. I've seen my bikes. A guy from Houston with the towers.
Chief Mo. I mean, I think Mo was there too, but it was Mike.
Yeah, I see him. But anyhow, yeah, I remember that, and and I've said that for quite a few years. The older I've gotten, kind of gone through the ranks and see things, and it's just like, well, it was a great question. It was kind of like, well, welcome to the American Fire Service, because a large segment of the fire service is like that. I mean, especially now, the last 2 to 3 decades, the departments are expanding and growing. I mean, the department that I'm in now, small department right outside of Pensacola, I mean, we're an example of that. The whole county is exploding. So you're between guys retiring out at 20 to 25 years in Florida now, as opposed to 30 to 35 years, and the expansion. You're going to have a lot of those situations where these younger guys, and now they seem like kids to me, but they're not. They're young adults, are going to be in those positions. So I tell you an interesting story that has to do with Texas. So last August, when I was appointed as the fire chief here very unexpectedly. Good friend of mine was my boss, the fire chief. Been doing it for a very long time. Uh, his cup just kind of got full, and he goes, I think it's time. And I totally wasn't expecting it. And I found out right before, I went to Texas for a conference with my younger brother, who's a fireman. I think you've met him before, DJ.
Yeah, DJ, yeah.
So, and I had no aspirations to be a fire chief. Quite honestly, I had no aspirations to be a deputy chief when I came here. And even before that, I spent 11 years as a battalion chief in my previous department. And I had no aspirations to be a battalion chief. I had passed it up twice when I was a captain. Spent almost 10 years as a captain. So, each time those opportunities present themselves, it's something that I didn't really aspire to do, but the opportunity presented and you started thinking about it. So anyhow, I say all that to say this. So I'm talking to my brother in Texas and I'm really struggling with this. I'm like, man, I don't want to spend the next 5 to 6 years, which is how many more years I plan on working, learning a new job, taking on the politics of a fire chief, understanding budgets better, understanding grants, understanding the state politics. It goes on. I was like, man, I don't know. And he stopped and he looked at me. He said, I'm going to give you your own advice. And he said exactly what you said.
Yeah.
And you can ask him about it because he's like, if not you, then who, Shannon? And I just sat there and I'm like, all right, man, you got me, I guess, But, but it's funny, and that happened in Texas too. That conversation happened in Texas, which led to me coming back and accepting the job, and and I'm 7-8 months into it, and just feel like I'm an imposter and trying to figure it out. But
well, you know what's interesting. We started this conversation off even before we hit record, and I said, I was talking about where you are, and you were saying how you're getting your feet under you with this chief of department job, and how very different it is from any other hat that you've worn in the past. And I said, but that whole if not you, then who? It absolutely makes sense that it follows you. But there's this thing about that. You have 34 years in the fire service, and it's like you're starting all over, right? Because as you go up through the ranks, you go from back step to chauffeur to front right seat to a car, right? And you go up the line. It's like you're starting over every single time. But what I think is really interesting is when you leap from a supporting chief role to the chief role, it becomes very different, I have to believe.
Oh, it does. It becomes, most every chief is going to tell you this. And it's like every rank, you don't have a full understanding or perspective until you step into those persons' shoes. But, my previous chief, Jonathan Kanzig, very good friend of mine, I've already had to deal with some pretty challenging issues the first 6 months, from, forced injury retirements to some lawsuits, things that chiefs deal with. And I remember him telling me, he goes, you never understand the full weight of it until you wear the 5 bugles. And he could not have been more right, and that perspective only comes when you step into that rank. And you can say that about most of the ranks coming up. But I can tell you that the difference of what I'm doing now versus the operations chief is I can never get away from it now. Like, you just, because the buck stops with you. And especially if you take the job serious, like, guys like Scott Thompson and all these other chiefs that take it serious, and I do, that you literally can't get away from it. I was at my son-in-law's OTS graduation, officer training school with the military up in Alabama. And in between his ceremonies and tours, about the 6th phone call in, as I'm kind of walking away from the group, his dad looks at me and he goes, "Can't get away from that new job, can you?" And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, and that's part of it. It's just, it is completely different and a whole different level of challenge. I put it to you this way. I've been asked a couple times, I said, "Man, are you enjoying the job?" And I'm like, if I'm being honest, I can't say I'm like really enjoying the job. I'm not enjoying it, but I'm not enjoying it. I said, but there are certain things that I feel like I'm getting the hang of. And I said, to put it in perspective, like if you were to come to me at last rank and you'd ask me 10 questions about operational stuff, 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, I can give you an immediate answer with good logical data,
Yep.
with a great conversation.
Yep.
Now, you come to me and you ask 10 questions, I'm good with 2. I'm having to call friends on the other 8. Other
I'll get
chiefs,
back to you.
friends.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very, very uncomfortable position to be in. But I've never been the smartest in the room, and I've always leaned on people around me when I'm trying to figure it out. And I've done the same thing with this position. And every chief that I've talked to and continue to talk to, they just kind of smile, they giggle, and they say, "Relax. This is the course."
Well, I've heard you talk about maturity and over your tenure in your years, and something you said on a previous show that I caught a clip of, which I really enjoyed. You talked about growing up within the fire service and maturing, and I say that as well. And I actually say all the time, with maturity comes clarity. Things get clearer for you and start to really make sense as you start to mature through this job, but not just job, in life. I mean, I'm a 48-year-old man and I'm still learning every single day. The one thing that I've truly learned, and I think it goes hand in hand with where you are, is I love the process, but when you're in the beginning stages of the process, it's hard. It's hard. And only until you start to see some of the fruits of your labor start to happen, where you start to see a corrective turn, or you're making an impact, or you get that random phone call or email, just a quick bump in your boost of morale, is when you go, okay, the process is working. The hard work I'm putting in. But that up front, Chief, that's an all uphill push, brother. I get it.
Yeah. Your description I think is spot on. Like everything from, I say maturity equals wisdom, which equals clarity. Like, if you're making that effort to learn, right? So guys talk about experience all the time.
Yeah.
And again, most of the quotes I've heard from other firemen, I've learned somewhere else. So again, I'm not the smartest guy, but I saw something in a class the other day, and it said experience is only experience if you reflect on it. I was like, oh, that's good. We've known that all the time, but why didn't I think of how to phrase it like that? Maturity is only maturity if you're willing to learn from it and, seek the wisdom and clarity. And if you're doing the same thing that you were doing 5 years previous on every single thing in your life, you're probably not growing. I'm not saying it's wrong. You're just probably not growing. And certainly as a chief officer, or as a fireman in general, just learning and getting, as you go and you get older, like if you're not tweaking what you're doing in your personal life and your professional life, you're probably not moving the needle on becoming a better person and a better firefighter and a better officer. And again, it's not wrong if you don't. That's just kind of my take on it. I kind of wish I could go back and replay it and know what I know now, as a fireman and as an adult, as a man, and as a parent, right? But
without a doubt,
that's life. I mean, the biggest thing we can do at this point, and I've made it, my mission probably the last 10 years, and I really enjoy doing it, is to share that, professionally with other firefighters. And that falls into 2 categories. It falls into professional stuff, right? Professional development, how you handle adversity, how you learn, how you train, how you instruct, how you identify different levels of get to people where you want. And then personally too, right? Because firemen, we do some, we're no different than the other individual. We do some very stupid stuff throughout our career, but taking those opportunities to pull those young kids in, and I do that now. I mean, I just recently did it with a young kid that works here in my department that reminds me of my youngest that is about to go to the fire academy, and I'm constantly talking to him about the decisions that he makes at 21 and 22. Because you can't get away with nowadays what we could 30 years ago.
Correct.
Anything with these, forget it, man. You do one screw up, and it could completely change the trajectory of your career and your life, right? So enjoying, at this point in my life and my career of really talking to guys and gals professionally and personally, and telling them things that I learned, and a lot of things that I wasn't told, to help guide them throughout their life and their career is a pretty cool thing. That's a really enjoyable part of where I'm at in my career now, if that makes sense.
Well, it does, and I think that's the beauty of mentoring. And what I think is really interesting, we talk about mentorship all the time, and a lot of times guys become mentors whether they knew they were or not. It just, over time and the way that they shine and give back, they can become a mentor without even knowing it. And what I think is really important, though, is we have to educate these younger kids that they also have to want to be mentored, right? The mentoree has to be willing to listen and have an open mind and understand that there are people that can bring tremendous value in their life in a lot of different ways, but they have to be open to it. And that's what I challenge my guys with all the time, professionally and at home with my kids, is you have to be willing to listen. When I was young, I knew everything. I was the biggest guy, biggest voice in the room. It was my way or no way, and that was the way I always was. And only in the last 10 or 12 years professionally have I really come to understand that it doesn't need to be that way. And in fact, you said it before, dumbest guy in the room, right? Surround yourself with great people. Man, I'm so much better because of that today, because I've allowed that to really take hold of who I am. And that's how I win. If that's a job, we're going with you. Just throwing it out there.
It's probably a lift assist or gas lift.
Hey, speaking of that, do you get out from behind that desk? I'm really curious. I mean, what does the Midway Fire Department look like for the chief of department? I mean, do you get out onto the street?
I do. We're a small department. We're a 2-station, 3-company department. And we run automatic aid with 3 other fire departments. So it's a small growing area, 5-6 stations. So not only, can I, but I need to. One of the guys asked me when I took this job, they said, well, so are you going to stop going to fires? I was like, man, what do you think? Like, okay, we'll see you at the next fire. I got a deputy chief, and the guy's done an amazing job. He's a home run, and he is super engaged, because that's exactly where I wanted him to be. But no, to answer your question, yeah, absolutely, man. And I do it for 2 reasons. One, to make sure the guys have what they need and to help, and 2, that's, I got to have something, man. I can't sit behind a desk and do a budget and talk to politicians. I got to have something that I thoroughly enjoy, and and I thoroughly enjoy going to fires. So and I know I have a limited time left, because I have a clock set for me personally that I want to move on to another part of my life. So I'm soaking in the last 5 years. So I would say that, yeah, the majority, not all of them, but I would say the majority of fires I go to, including one last night that turned out to be nothing. I respond from home. I live in the district here in the south end of the county.
So I something you said, Chief, which I think is so important, is you said, I need to, right? Because it's coming up the ranks like you have. And I want to talk about a little bit of your pedigree and your history, because you've been exposed to a few different departments along your journey. And I think that really probably has helped shape you as a more well-rounded firefighter in chief. So I want to hit that in a minute, but you said, I need to go. And I think that's important for people to know what they need to be good at what they do. And if you still need to go get a little dirty or smell that smoke in the street, or, back up the guys, I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, man. There's a couple things that I need to do throughout my entire career, and I think it's super important so that I stay connected. And one is still going to fires. And if we were in a large department, I'm sure that would be a lot more difficult. But we're not, so I don't have any excuses. And secondly, when I took this job 5 years ago, the deputy's job, and now I pretty much stopped traveling and teaching. And that traveling and teaching was, especially when I look back, was one of the most beneficial things I did in my career for my own professional development, and then also for just feeding myself, so that the frustrations of the fire department, because we all have them, became a lot more tolerable. But now here, the things that keep me motivated is getting out and doing operational stuff, mostly the fire part of it, and then at least a couple times a year to travel to the conferences where I see guys like you and guys that I've met over the last 15 plus years. I'm going to the Firemanship Conference in July. Nice. That's one of the things. I do 1 to 2 a year, and I tell them all the time, I say, man, I got to go. Like, I got to feed myself. Like, I've got to put myself back in that environment, and although I'm not necessarily making the operational decisions, that's my deputy chief, I still must and will stay up on things in the American Fire Service, because I am the checks and balances at the end of the day, including the decisions the deputy chief makes. I empower him, to run the department, the operations like he sees it should be run, but it has to be within the sandbox that I set. And the only way I'm going to know that is if I stay up on it. So in my mind, it's an absolute must, it's a need and it's a want. And, maybe I'm looking at it wrong. I don't know. But,
no,
but that's the way I see it.
No doubt. I mean, you need that fuel. You need to come back and you need to remain hungry. I think a lot of people lose that lust for their hunger of what this is all about. And what we don't want are guys getting into those upper positions within our departments and forgetting about the ground floor. Like, you fell in love with this job because you got your teeth kicked in at a fire and you saw the impact you made or the difference you made that day. And that, coupled with the camaraderie and the love for the job, you can't lose sight of that. And I think so many people do over time.
It's easy to, man. When you move up in these positions, my perspective is small fire departments. The departments I've worked at in my career range from a couple stations up to 20-something stations. And I can tell you with 100% certainty, I think the larger the department is so much more difficult for the fire chief to do exactly what I'm talking. However, I'll say this, that if you work in a smaller department, and I'm just going to call it 8, 9, 10 stations or lower, and you're not, I don't know. I mean, everybody has opinions, and my opinion is that you don't have any excuse. I mean, I'm busy, but one of my closest friends is a fire chief in Escambia County, and he is way busier than me. I can assure you he has a difficult time getting to fires a lot more than I do. And that's just the sheer size of the organization.
Yeah.
So in the smaller departments, we, in my opinion, I've always been critical on fire chiefs and chiefs in general, and I can be because I'm a chief now, I say that jokingly. So, but the smaller departments, we don't have a whole lot of excuses. We don't have a whole lot of excuses not to be somewhat engaged in the operations. We don't have excuses not to be well versed on things. We don't have excuses as to how to control morale. It blows me away when you have a 2 or 3 station or 4 station department and there's bad morale. I don't know how that happens. I mean, I know how it can get there, right? But I mean, as the chief or a leader of an organization, you've got the direct contact to help impact what that looks like. The culture, the morale, the money, the standards on the fire ground, the standards and behaviors within the firehouse, but it's easy to get jaded and to get.
But if you have all those tools, right, in your position, you have all those tools, which means you get to set the rules. You get to decide how those tools are implemented down the chain. Yeah. Why do so many people get it wrong? What is the one thing that's missing then? Is it just their own internal drive or desire to work hard on behalf of the people? Like, where's the disconnect then?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. It's a really loaded question, and you could probably go off in 10 different directions. I'll say probably the first and foremost, I think the biggest challenge is the leadership part. Leadership in itself is actually very simple when you look at the definition, and how to do it, but it's actually very complex to execute, right? So, I have my administrative staff and the battalion chiefs, and obviously it goes down to company officers and firefighters. Every single one of them respond differently. They're motivated differently. There are different things that are important to them based on their value systems, based on their upbringing, and all of that can create a really significant challenge of how you utilize and impact your influence. And the thing with influence too is it can go 2 different directions, right? Especially the higher up you go. Steve Shaw from Fort Lauderdale, now he's deputy chief in the town of Jupiter in South Florida. He talks about your words have weight, and every step you go up, And I was on his podcast on fire engineering a couple years ago, and we talked, and he mentioned that. And I texted him like 2 months later. I was like, dude, that is one of the most impactful statements I think I've heard as a chief officer. Is like, think before you speak, because if you do it wrong, that influence could skyrocket and benefit you, or it could go the opposite direction and really hurt what you're doing in the organization. And here's what we don't know a lot of times as chiefs. Is it goes the opposite direction, you don't know it. If you don't create an environment where you're welcoming and getting feedback in different levels, you could say or react a certain way and create such a ripple effect of negativity that you don't know about it. And when you finally find out about it, it becomes increasingly difficult to deal with. So a combination of all those things really can separate you. And then the reality too is that when you get up to the chief's level, you deal with so much bullshit sometimes. Yeah. Everything from grievances to lawsuits, to challenges to it. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I understand how fire chiefs can get separated, and I understand how they can get jaded. I truly do. My goal for me personally, in my own personal development, is to not allow myself somehow, some way, to go down that road. And the first step of me doing is back to what you had asked earlier. What do you do? You still go to fires? I got to, man.
Yeah.
I got to. Because I mean, when I'm out there, whether I'm standing at the command post or maybe I'm assuming a division position on a forward operating chief, like I love it, man. I love being around the guys. I love going to the calls. At this point, I've got friends that have sons that I'm going to fires with.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
That brings so much joy. So when I come back to the more challenging stuff that the firefighters just honestly don't see and don't know, that's the way it is, no big deal, then it makes it so much easier for me to stay grounded. So to answer your question, we could spend probably days because there's so many
without a doubt
areas that you dip into. I think, for me, I've got certain things that I try to do that I think have been successful and I think they're beneficial. I mean, as an example, I still love coming to work. I mean, I do. I started my 35th year, and I still, and even in the fire chief's position where I'm sitting in this office most of the day, I still thoroughly love coming to work and doing the job and talking to the guys. That somehow, some way, that happens.
Yeah. Well, I know you're a second generation. Your brother and yourself are second generation, right? So, what did that look like growing up? I mean, your father. I'm assuming it was your father that was on the job prior to you. And so, what was that like growing up? I mean, was the fire department front and center at the home? Was your dad like you and your brother ate up and bought in?
So my dad, he did 23 years. He retired a little early. He was a very engaged operational guy. He was highly respected on the fire ground, but he was kind of these personalities, and we've seen him in the fire service. He was either really well liked or he was not well liked. And typically people who didn't like him were the ones that you probably weren't seeking advice from. The guys that were into the job, that took advantage, that took it serious. They really liked him. So I think for operationally for me and my brother, without a doubt, that's exactly where it comes from, talking to him at an early age. But the interesting story to that is that growing up, I didn't spend a whole lot of time in the firehouse other than visiting when my parents were married. They divorced at 13, so the whole family kind of went different directions. My brother was younger. He's 5-6 years younger than me, and he was at the time 6 or 7 years old. Spent a lot of time with my dad. Actually went to a bunch of fires when my dad was the deputy chief. He'd hop in the car and hop in the buggy and go to fires and watch it, where I didn't do it that often. When I got out of high school, I realized very quickly that working in a burger joint was not the best thing to do. So I asked my dad to help me pay for some community college, and he told me he wasn't going to pay. And I'm like, are you kidding? Seriously? And my mom didn't have the money. He goes, but if you want, I'll pay for you to go to the fire academy. And I'm like, fire academy, like
right.
And my then girlfriend, who is now my now wife, that we've been together for almost 40 years.
Awesome.
She looked at me and she said, well, why not? It's free education. Go to the fire academy, get a job, 24-48 until you figure out what you want to do. So I said, okay, well, I mean, that makes sense. So I went, and about 3 or 4 weeks into it, I just absolutely fell in love with it, where my mom, it took her like 3 or 4 years before she finally believed me that I was doing it for me and not my dad. Now, conversely, my brother, who grew up going to fires with my dad, he went the opposite direction. He was kind of one of those, artistic type guys. He was in a band. We both grew up surfing, so he did a lot of that. And he just didn't gravitate to it. And then in his mid to...
What were you saying? You went away to Alabama and your phone wouldn't stop? I mean, here it is, right?
Well, that's probably my kids. I guarantee it. When it starts ringing that fast, it's my boys texting me about something.
Dad, where are you? Dad.
Yeah, but anyhow, he was in his mid-20s, mid to late 20s before he decided to jump on it, and it basically boiled down to he was getting married and having a kid, and between me and my dad, we told him, said, man, you gotta get off your ass and do something. He worked EMS and a couple of things, so he decided to go. Long story short, he absolutely fell in love with it. Yeah. And the rest is history. He's now retired and went to another department, and he's into the job. So yeah, our dad did have a big influence, obviously, in going to the fire department. Unfortunately, he passed away about 4 or 5 weeks ago of cancer. It was either military or job related. It doesn't really matter. But he was here long enough to see his boys, go through the fire service, and he was at my promotional ceremony when I got promoted to fire chief here, which was really cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Well,
I gotta show you something just real quick.
Yeah, please, absolutely.
Now, since we're talking about it, how
Yeah.
to say this. I don't know if you can tell. This is a picture of him.
Awesome.
You see
Yeah.
the cigarette out of the mouth.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What
I
year?
think it's
When
just
is that? Is that like early
That
'80s,
was-
mid '80s?
That was probably in the mid '80s, and this is
Yeah.
a picture of him when this is somewhere, probably in a housing project in Fort Walton where he used to work. He was that was probably early '80s there.
Firehouse software got you buried in tabs, logins, and paper sign-in sheets. You've got one system for training, another for reporting, something else for alerting, scheduling, inspections. You get the idea. That's why departments across the country are switching to Alpine Software's Red Alert, the tailor-made fire service software that brings everything together in one system with one bill and no more paperwork. Red Alert replaces your pile of platforms with a single, customizable solution that handles training, alerting, inspections, truck checks, percentage reports, award points, ISO prep, OSHA tracking, the list goes on and on. Everything you do your way. No two Red Alert systems are the same. Alpine builds your software around the unique needs of your department. And when it's time to switch, Alpine will convert all your old data with no setup fees at zero risk. Their entire team is based in Rochester, New York, which means no support runaround. You can pick up the phone and speak to somebody who understands the fire service and gets your issues fixed. With over 30 years of trust and an average customer tenure of 19 years, Alpine's mission is to be the last software purchase your department ever makes. It's battle-tested, firefighter approved, and nearest ready. So if you're ready to save time, reduce costs, and finally get control of your operations, visit alpinesoftware.com for a completely free consultation. That's alpinesoftware.com. Red Alert by Alpine Software. Built for the job, backed by firefighters.
I can say this. I know it makes sense. I mean, it all makes sense. But I know I am so protective of the fire service, and that's a lot of why I do what I do with this. I'm so protective of it because of those early memories that I had of the firehouse. And, you know, I talk about how those guys, when I used to visit my dad at the firehouse or was allowed to come to the firehouse, I looked at those guys like they were 12 feet tall. I mean, I have the fondest memories of those guys. They were larger than life giants. And I'm so protective of that I don't want anything to ever jeopardize the love that I had for it. And I think it's so important that we educate our children today about what this job truly is. And I think so often we always talk about the negative of it. They see the wear and tear of it, but they don't hear the upside of it. And I think that's a lot of reasons why we're not seeing a lot of generational firefighters anymore. Firemen want their kids to go do something else. You could do better than me. But
Yeah.
the fire service has done so much for so many. And that upsets me when we don't value it enough to want the same experience or a better experience for our children. And I think the fire service can still offer that. I really do.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, especially the last 10 years. And I think that's why we're seeing a downtick in firefighters is that we have career-wide has really, I don't want to say if we're scaring people away from it.
Yeah.
I mean, the job is dangerous at times, and there are definitely some long-term downsides to it. However, I would agree with you, like, you know, next to, you know, my wife and my kids, you know, and my family, the fire department's the best thing that ever happened to me. Like, I've got, you know, I said it, I grew up in the firehouse. I mean, I probably learned more from my 20s from the men in the firehouse than I did from my father growing up in the teens, just because of how my upbringing with a divorce happened. Yeah, it's super special. And my youngest, I got 3 kids. I got a daughter who's off and married and doing great things and married to a wonderful guy. And I have a son who just finished HVAC school, and he's making way more money than a fireman right now.
Awesome.
And then my youngest just graduated this year, and he has had his heart set on going to the fire academy for years now. And we've had tons of conversation. In fact, we just got back from a vacation in Denver, my niece's wedding. We stayed there a week, and I visited some friends that work in Denver and took them some of the oldest firehouses in the city.
Yeah, beautiful.
And we constantly having conversations about what you talked about, like the how special this occupation is.
Yeah.
And when he goes into these firehouses, when he goes into some of the old ones that I worked at, and he sees his dad on a wall, or we go into these city firehouses in Denver, and he's never been into an old city firehouse. Totally different than suburban firehouse. He was just like mesmerized. And I'm like, yeah, man, like this is cool. Like if I could go back and be a fireman again, I don't know if there's anything in my mind, is more fun or more cool than doing. And I can see he's, his light bulb is clicking on, and that's something that he's interested in. And I've told all my kids, whether it's the fire department or something else, if you find something, we all know it, but if you find something you love, man, and you get to do in an occupation, man, it's like winning the lottery, because most people don't. If the fire department is that for you, then jump on it. Don't pass it up.
I couldn't agree with you more. My path was an interesting path for me, but I'm grateful for every step of it. And would I have done it differently years ago? Yes, but would I change it today? No. And your journey's your journey, but I truly find that finding something you love, a passion, unconditionally, outside of my wife and kids, I mean, the fire service is everything to me. Mm-hmm. And it's done so much for me, and it's made me a better person, which in turn makes me a better husband and a better father. And so I'm grateful for that. Yeah. So I want to shift a little bit. Let's talk about your pedigree, right? So we talked a little bit about your father and the influence there growing up, and knowing when you got into the fire academy, you fell in love with it. But you've worked for a few different fire departments in a few different roles. And so I'm curious how that worked chapter after chapter, from chapter one of going through and starting in your first department up to where you are today. Each story or each chapter along the way has probably helped mold and shape you to where you are today. So I'm just curious what that looked like for you, and how important was it to be influenced by different departments, different cultures, different SOGs, all that stuff. I got to think that played a big role in who you are today.
Yeah, it's a huge role, really, especially coming to this department, because obviously, a lot of what we're doing now in the Midway Fire District was drawn off of my experiences in, the three other departments I worked at, two of them primarily. I started my career in Destin, Florida, which is a little vacation community. It's an awesome little, not so much little anymore, place to go, but I spent 3.5 years there before I went to the city of Fort Walton Beach, which is just east of Pensacola. It's a smaller, older city that is very automatic gate based, a bunch of small departments. The Fort Walton Beach metro area has like 8 or 9 stations, right out within a mile or two outside of it, another 4 or 5 stations. So it's your typical suburban America, but it's an older community that for the size does a decent amount of fires. I mean, no different anywhere else, probably a little bit more than some other places. The other department I worked 14 years at was Escambia County, which is in Pensacola, Florida. It's the county fire department, and that's a very, very, very unique fire department, because you can find yourself working in, the inner city type ghetto stuff in the country or on the beach. And both cultures in both those departments aligned very closely.
Yeah.
So the experiences that I've gained from working with, good officers, good firefighters, and at times some very busy firehouses, in addition to, getting outside my bubble and attending training and conferences my entire career, has 100% shaped the things that we are doing operationally in the Midway Fire District now, because it's all derived from that. And I don't want to say it's constantly changing. What I like to refer to is it's constantly evolving. So we're constantly analyzing, just as I did in my last job for the last 10 to 15 years. Like when I started maturing and getting the clarity you were talking about, and how important it is that we're constantly evolving. We're constantly looking at what we can do to move the needle. I'm not looking to slam it, because it just a little bit today is eventually going to get there. But
That's
what
right.
can we do? Not to change, because a lot of people think these guys go to conferences or what they learn in departments, it's always got to be changed. It's not necessarily that. If it's a measurable change and it's worth doing and it makes sense, then we need to take a look at it. And all of that has really kind of derived from my experiences in the other departments. And then as I've gone up in the ranks, having a seat at the table, so to speak, where you become instrumental in implementing different things in the different departments. And the interesting thing now is the deputy and the fire chief. It's really cool because, I was really empowered as the deputy chief here to do things that I thought should be done. And the fire chief said he wanted it, and there wasn't a single thing that I proposed doing. Everything from time standards of skill-based things on the fire ground to the promotional processes that we're using now, which are very unique, has to do with peer reviews, that he ever give pushback or anything. And it's interesting now that, people say, well, why do you promote? Well, like I say, after doing it, I mean, there is truth that you have a seat at the table, and if you're leading correctly, not perfectly, because we don't do it perfectly, but if you're leading correctly and you're constantly adjusting your leadership skills, Each level you go up, you have a seat at the table, and you have that opportunity to do what all these guys at the conferences want to see their leaders, their bosses, their chiefs, and their officers do. But it goes back to the original when you and I talked, and this is why I've said it to the kid and why my brother reminded me of it. If not you, then who? Like, you talk the talk all the time. It's time for you to step up and walk the next walk.
Right.
Because now you have the opportunity to do these things that you think are super important for the firefighters in the fire department. So yeah, to circle back to your question, 100%, man. You know, the city of Fort Walton Beach, especially, you know, the experiences over there, a very aggressive, forward-thinking fire department with a really good culture has really shaped, you know, the type of firefighter I am. And then Escambia County, after, you know, spending 14 years with EMS and fire over there and working with some of the best officers I've ever worked with in my career, that definitely has helped shape me, you know. So if anybody had to say that I am a product of the city of Fort Walton Beach first, and second, Escambia County, and thirdly, probably equally important, is all the guys that I've met the last 15 years teaching and taking classes. All that combined has created a lot of things that we do here, you know. Again, experience if you're reflecting on it. Like, if you're learning on it and constantly adjusting, you know.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because we always talk about get out of your own zip code. And so many people have longevity in their career. They never leave their own city or township or community or county, except maybe going to some training or meeting guys from other places. But when you have the opportunity to run and operate and hold a position within different departments, you get an appreciation for what works and what doesn't work, things you like, things you don't like. Mm-hmm. And now to be in the position you're at today, that's got to be fun, because now you can take all those pieces, match it with the way Midway has done it, and you can kind of create a narrative that is supported by experience. And that's fun.
Yeah, 100%. You know, one of the reasons I went to Escambia many, many years ago, way before they ever were even on the map as a fire department, was because I want to know how you do it.
Yeah.
Like, I worked with EMS as a medic over there, and I'm like, I want to, you know, they had a very unique thing where they have part-time firefighters, which most places don't. So, you know, and I knew some guys over there. I'm like, well, I want to go experience how you guys do it. And I knew it was similar, not the same. But, you know, if you don't get outside your bubble, if you're not constantly trying to do that, whether it's going to work at another place or probably more commonly just going to classes or bringing people in, man, you'll never know what you don't know. And you're just going to sit that thing with John Maxwell says, and you're just going to hit your leadership lid within your own bubble. And you're going to think you're where you need to be, or you're at the top, but you're not. And even at every single level, the more you get out. Every time I go to a conference now, once or twice a year, I leave something. I'm like, golly, man, how did I not know that? Like, that's really, really good, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I still love picking up nuggets, and I'm like, whoa, I've never heard it that way before, you know? And it just kind of, then you start going through that filing system in your head of all the things that it pertains to, and you go, wait a minute, that makes sense now. This clicks, that clicks. I love that, man. I love putting that together.
Yeah,
you mentioned a seat at the table. That's important for me. You know, I think we need the right people to go up the line. We talk about leadership or lack thereof in the fire service, which I think is something that we have to, it's systemic, and I think we have to put a stop to it. And I don't know what the right recipe is, other than getting the right people into the right positions. And you and I, we were like, you asked me the other day, what do you kind of want to talk about, this and that? And I kind of went down that road, and you said, perfect. We're doing that now. We're working on putting the right people in the right positions. I just got done reading a book. I'm trying very hard to read more. And when I say read, most of it's audiobooks, because I'm in the truck. I travel so much that if I can consume audiobooks, that's what I'm trying to do, following up with the hard copy at home or, you know, in the office or whatever, right? So I just got done with this book called From Good to Great, and it's an entrepreneurial book where it focuses on 11 of the best like CPG businesses in the history of the United States, and how they grew from good companies to great companies, and how they broke that all down. And the one cool thing that the author talked about was getting the right people on the bus. And then from getting your people on the bus, you have to make sure they're in the right seats. You could have all the right people on the bus, but if they're sitting in the wrong seats, it's still not going to work. And so as a leader, as a chief of department, you have your bus. You need to get your people on that bus, and then you need to find to make sure that you're putting the right people in the right seat on that bus. What does that look like for Chief Stone this day and age?
It's a great question, man. Nick Saban, obviously one of the most successful college football coaches ever.
Yes.
He has a little speech. I don't know if you've seen it, but he said his job in spring training is to get right people on the bus and the wrong people off.
I love that.
Heard that years ago, and I'm like, oh man, well, how do we do that in the fire department?
Right.
It's so true, because you just can't come in and fire people. Not that you want to do that. I mean, maybe some people, but not here in my organization for sure. So you have to create processes, and it starts at the hiring. So this is going to be a long answer, okay?
Yeah,
so
go. All yours.
Right. So, and these are my opinions, and these are things that we've implemented here at the Midway Fire District, and we had certain portions of this that we did in the city of Fort Walton Beach. But being a city and being a lower rank, there were things that I just couldn't get them convinced to do over there that fortunately I think we're doing here that's working. And first and foremost, and we did this at Fort Walton and we do it really good here, is that obviously it starts with your hiring process. And that's a generational thing, right? So you start today, you're not really going to see the impact for that another 5, 8, 10, 15, 20 years down the road as these right guys that you hire aspire to move up, right? So what does that look like for us? In the state of Florida, you typically have to be a certified firefighter and a certified EMT to even get on the job anywhere, which is about a year's worth of schooling. Most of the places you have to be a paramedic, which is another year to year and a half school. So it's a little bit more challenging in a lot of places in the state of Florida to get on as a firefighter because you have to put the effort in before as opposed to getting hired. They pay for you to go to the academy and all your schooling. Now, we've had a combination of both those in the last couple of years because we've had a firefighter shortage in the state of Florida. So you have to sometimes look at guys that are either in school, on some occasions send them to school. But what that looks like for us is we have a hiring board that's comprised of all the ranks, and they're given pretty direct orders of what I want them to do. And it's really simple. We want you to hire the person, not the qualifications. It's as simple as that. And we design our questions around to try to learn as much as we can about that person. Now, working in the panhandle of Florida, we don't have any large urban cities. The only thing that we have that is a larger city is the city of Pensacola, and that would be considered a small city. So we typically know people that know people. So especially if you're certified or you come somewhere else, somebody knows somebody they can call to get an unofficial reference on you. So there's a lot of that goes on, and we do our very best to hire the person, which, what does that look like for us? Well, there's times that we've passed up firefighter paramedics with experience. So again, that's about 2 to 2.5 years of training to get to that point, plus how many years of experience to hire a guy that's in the fire academy that's not even an EMT. Because we're investing in a 25-year investment, so I'm okay with spending the money to send the guy to EMT school. I'm okay to pay him while he's in school, to pay him overtime, when he runs over to get qualified, because this is an investment. So that's your first step, right? You don't always get it right. So how do you ensure to the best of your ability that you weed them out? You have a good probationary process. Our probationary process is like many others, is 12 months. The difference between ours is in 3 phases. There's a task book, they have to complete it. At the end of each phase, there's a practical test, and I like to refer to it as a pass-pass test. So they prepare you for it. Like, tell me all the details about your CBA, right? So if you can't pass, you're having problems with it, it's a red flag. If we can't fix it,
we want you to pass. Yeah, we're not here to get you.
Right.
We want you to pass. Yes.
Yeah. The second part of that is what's called an EPE. It's an employee performance evaluation, and that EPE is made of about, I'd have to look at it, it's about 20 different points, and out of those 20 points, there's like 18 of them that are very subjective, and the company officer fills it out. And basically it says, what's their attitude like? What's their work ethic like? How do they receive criticism? And all this. And it's a meet standards or don't meet standards. You have to, and in order to pass it to go to the next phase, 100% is meet standards. It's not a need improvement. It's not you're doing well. It's an opportunity for the officer to really give feedback. If the probationary firefighter has one section that does not meet standards, they immediately go into a 30-day performance improvement plan. So we give them the opportunity to say, hey, listen, Joe, here's what you got to do. I'm going to help you get there. 30 days later, they go through the same cycle. If they don't pass it again, no questions asked, they're gone. So people say, well, why do you have that? Because I want my bosses to have the ability to say, this guy's not fitting in.
This episode's brought to you by Ease Alert Heart Smart Alerting Solutions. Have you ever been jolted awake by a blaring station alarm only to sprint out half asleep, heart pounding? That's that legacy fire station alerting system, and it's doing much more harm than good. So meet Ease Alert, the world's first heart smart firefighting alerting system. Designed by firefighters, proven by science, their purpose-built alerting devices deliver vibration and visual alerts shaving seconds off of turnout times while improving health for the first responder. Ease Alert isn't just about comfort, it's about safety. Firefighters are 14 times more likely to die from heart attacks during alarm responses than during non-emergency duties. Ease Alert's Heart Smart system slashes stress, improves performance safety, and allows you to be the best firefighter you can be, on duty and at home. From bunk alerts and wristbands to dispatching consoles, display boards, and Firehouse lighting, every component is purpose-built by firefighters for firefighters. No more missed tones, no more startled response, just fast, smooth, safe alerts. Fire departments across the country, like Mission, Texas, and St. Augustine, Florida, report calmer crews and faster turnout times, and their chiefs even say that the system is battle-tested and firefighter approved. So are you ready to switch? Visit easealert.com and discover how silent alerting can save time, reduce stress, and improve safety for you, your crew, and your community. Visit easealert.com to learn more and tell them National Fire Radio sent you.
Now, the argument will come, well, how do you just, how do you deal with, like, maybe it's a personality conflict? Well, you have to have bosses above them that are actually engaged, so that the battalion chief can go, we've had problems with this kid. Like, he just seems to always have an attitude. Okay, he's not fitting in. Go to the next guy, right? So between the right hiring process and a good probationary period, I believe that you're setting yourself up for the best chances to have that foundational firefighter. Now, what's the next step? The next step is to build promotional processes that positions people in the best position to promote. But even before that is building a culture of expectations that are leading up to the promotional process. So what does that look like? For us at Midway, and for my previous department at Fort Walton, is that if you weren't seeking outside education, if you weren't going outside your bubble, you were the minority. And not only that, but we bring people in. So there are two categories of firefighters. You have firefighters, and I would fall in this first category, where I'm constantly was reaching out, calling, whether it's listening to podcasts, being on it, going to class, I'm learning. Then you have the second set that they come in and they do a really good job. They give 100% when they're here, and I'm totally fine with that. They don't like getting out a whole lot. So those guys, nothing wrong with those guys. They're in a series of lives that's different. They're raising kids. I get it. I totally get it. So what do we do to help those guys? We bring outside instructors in 3 to 4 times a year because they're being exposed to it. Now, all that being the case, that's the culture building up to a promotional process. So in our department, we have 3 different promotional ranks. We have driver, we have company officer, which is a captain, and we have battalion chief, and then it goes to deputy after that. Each one of those processes look a little bit different because I'm looking for a different person for driver. As an example, we give bonus points that add on at the end of the score of your promotional exam for driver, and they don't get any points for being having a bachelor's degree. You want to know why? I don't want them. It does not help them become a better driver. Now, as you move up administratively, sure, yes. I don't want my firefighters being so hyper-focused on getting a bachelor's degree because they can get 5 extra points. So what do we have them do? They get extra points. Let's see. Let me pull it up here real quick. I'll tell you exactly what it is. So for drivers, they get extra points for going to up to 2 conferences a year. Those conferences have to be approved by the deputy chief, and they have to be fire-based. Or they get one conference that's an EMS conference that has to be approved by the deputy chief. There's a process that they apply. It goes through. We track it. Within a certain period of time, they get points. They get seniority and step up rank, a small percentage, and they get. We have one division of special ops in our department, which is rope rescue. So if you're rope rescue operations certified, you get a point. So, and these are not going to swing a test. Right. We've had guys that are within a point or two. These points make a difference on who gets promoted. Sure. But the point is that each rank, we build in things that we believe are important to develop the person to be best for that rank. As an example, one of the points that you can get, the extra points you can get for a captain, is if you attend the company officer class at FDTN, because we think that is super valuable and it brings a lot to the table.
Love that.
So to back up, to give you an idea about this promotional process, we revamped them about 1.5 years ago, and we put a committee together that was comprised of union members, myself, at the time I was the deputy chief, And really, it just took a bulk of the fire department. You can call them union members, but of course, the union's involved in everything that we do. It just makes sense. Then we identified what traits that we believe make the best rank of a driver, company officer, and battalion chief. And we put them on a whiteboard. And I said, okay, now that we've identified these traits, the next column is how do we measure these traits? I want to know if we're saying that these list of 15 items make the best driver in our department, then let's figure out how to measure them and let's put them into a promotional process.
I love that.
So what we did as an example for drivers is the way the drivers looks is it's broken into several categories, if I can find them. It's broken into it's broken into the practical portion, which is a driver's test. It's broken into a pumping portion, which is 2 pumping evolutions. And they have to go through basically about 8 months of training to become what we call a step-up driver or a step-up lieutenant. That's our rank for driver.
Right.
And the promotional process comes out of that training. They don't get any curveballs. There's like 15 to 20 scenarios they can get. And it's a really comprehensive practical pumping evolution. They take a written test, which is a small percentage of the test. That gets them into the game. You got to pass the written to get to that. And they also do what's called a peer perception evaluation. And the peer perception evaluation is a ranking system that every single person in the fire department, because we're a small department, with the exception of probationary firefighters, have an opportunity to rank you on. And it's a 2-page thing, and basically what they rank you on is personal initiative, motivation and attitude, communication skills, training preparation, job knowledge, and experience.
Wow.
And it's not a point system, it's a ranking system. So if you have 5 candidates,
Right.
and Jeremy, you're coming in, you have these 5 candidates, you have an opportunity to rank who you believe is going to be the best down.
Yep.
That is 40% of the promotional score for the drivers.
Wow.
That is 50% of the score for the captains, and that is 80% of the score for the battalion chiefs. And it's a very unique concept.
Yeah, without a doubt.
People have a hard time wrapping their head around. And
but you're getting buy-in on all levels.
Yeah.
Everybody's a part of the process, right? When you said you sat down and worked hand in hand with the union to develop these, processes, right? And then you're talking about the ranking system where the rank and file firefighter has a say in what the leadership or promotional process can potentially look like and who they want to be in those seats. There's tremendous value there because you're showing them you believe in the process and you believe in your own people to help provide the right feedback, and you desire that, and on the back end you're going to follow through with what your department's looking and wanting to have in place. It's a win.
Yeah. And one of the concerns that people have had that's come up, when we have this discussion or other people are considering doing it, and they were like, well, I mean, I get the peer thing, but isn't it a popularity contest? And I said, well, no, yes, maybe, no. I said, yeah, it's a popularity contest. So because they're going to measure them in 2 areas. They're going to be, do they know what they're doing, or are they a good person? So this whole thing about, like, when I was coming to the fire service, I had some guys like, I don't give a shit what people think about me. And I've always disagreed with that. I think you need to care what people think about you because it's a direct reflection upon what you do and the type of person you are. You don't have to need to drive around trying to please everybody, but if, here's the thing. If you talk to 10 guys and 9 of those 10 guys, Jeremy, said I was an asshole, guess what?
Yep.
I'm probably an asshole, right?
You're an asshole. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
And the peer perception they started doing before I came in here, and the union was the one that actually proposed it, believe it or not, was surprising. And we've tweaked it since then. And I can tell you we've used the peer perception thing for the last 5 years, and we've had a series of, I want to say 3 or 4 different testings in the ranks. And it's been right. I am not BSing you 100% of the time. And when we had these discussions about the percentages at the committee level, and I let them choose the percentages, like I was surprised they were as high as they were. I said, well, let me ask you guys a question. If today you had let's just say we're going to promote a captain based on a vote in the fire department, and everybody voted on these 5 guys, do you think the right guy would be picked? And they went, well, yeah, for sure. And I'm like, right. That's the purpose of it. That's the point. Your reputation matters. So when you come in, it's part of our culture that if you want to get promoted, you're going to have to put the work in. You're going to have to fit in the culture. You're going to have to be stable with your value system and the way you treat people. And you're going to have to be good at the job or you'll never get promoted. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
I mean, that's the days of competing and having a good test one day and getting promoted. at least in this organization, don't exist anymore. So you have to put the work in and fit the mold. So there's a lot more to it than that, but the takeaway and the goal was what you originally asked, and that was the goal of the committee, was how do we position the right people to have the opportunity to promote? Because they still have to compete for it. We just had a driver's exam just 3 weeks ago, and all the candidates were really good. And the top 3 were like super close within points of each other. And they had to compete on it, and so they still had to earn it. But the right people were testing that wanted to test, and I think that's the first step in doing it. But
yes.
This process is difficult, in that I think in a small department, I think when you start dealing with the peer perception, you get to a larger department. There's a lot of challenges.
Sure.
I don't really see that working, in a large urban department. I think it'd be unique to smaller departments.
That was kind of where I was going to take it, was to put it in perspective. On a small department level, there's, this is very doable. What I love about this, though, is the accountability that's built in from the get. And from the first day into the fire academy, people are being judged on their work ethic, who they are, how they present themselves. Everything matters. And what that does then is that then defines your culture. And your culture is not a checkbox minimum level. We have far surpassed the minimum acceptable level, because we're holding people to a higher standard, because everybody's being held accountable for their own actions. And so when you have successful departments, it's not even fire departments, just organizations and businesses, when they're successful and have a thriving culture, which we have fire departments all over this country that are top shelf when it comes to culture and promoting firemanship and promoting themselves, and in a place where people want to work. We have fire companies like that all over. There are people jaded all across the fire service. We also have unbelievable fire service cultures that are out there in firehouses across this country. And it's because it starts from the get. And this is that type of program where it really boosts the inner workings to make people accountable of their own shit, so that when it comes along through the process, we don't want bottom dwellers. The bottom dwellers they can't hang in Midway, because you expect so much more from them.
That is a very, very accurate statement. And
love that.
One of the goals of this was to set a clear roadmap from the day that a person is hired here. And it's not a continuously moving target, right? So when you come in here, they quickly figure out the culture and see the expectations. If the guys want to be successful, they know exactly what they have to do. They also know too that one of the biggest things that the previous chief did, and that I am the same exact way, is the value systems. We're not here to preach or anything like that, but we don't accept certain behaviors. And that doesn't mean like if you make a mistake, you're gone. Like, it's life. Everybody makes mistakes. But if you're that type of person that constantly puts yourself in front of everybody else, you're gonna have a problem in this organization. And we make that crystal clear, and we make it enormously clear when you promote to officer, is that your job now is to put everybody else before yourself, just as you would as a parent with your kids, because your responsibility is big, to take care of every man and woman that's under your command, and we build that. And it's not even like you got to convince them. It's just the way we are. It's just the way our organization is. Yeah. So guys that want that fit in and thrive. Guys that don't, that's cool. No harm, no foul. They'll find somewhere else they want to go.
They're not comfortable there. And that's the beautiful thing. Winning fire companies don't have losers, because losers, they're just not welcome, and they know it. They're never going to be a part of the team because they don't want to be. And that's the beautiful thing about it. Something else too, the person over qualifications. And I think what's really interesting is when you talk about the expectations, and I think that's a big disconnect in our fire service today, where the younger generations, right? When you start looking at like millennials to Gen Z to Gen Alpha, right? We're having all these generations come through the fire service, obviously, and the younger they're getting, the more they need and want direction and to understand what the expectations are. And your system clearly defines how this process works. For your next 25 years in the Midway Fire Department, this is how you navigate the system. And this is how it works. And the better you do, the more the accountability is built in, the more points you get, that as you progress through your career, you can do better and better in this department if you go all in from the get. And I think about that with the younger generation, and so many guys and girls in the fire service today are floundering around because they lack direction. They lack understanding what the expectations are from different fire departments. There's a lot of cross information, unclear, and it's not transparent. And the younger generations today want clear and concise information. They want constructive feedback. They want to know what the expectations are. And if we're not doing that as an organization, we are failing our people. And in your culture, you're clearly defining this is how it works. You want the roadmap to 25 years? Here it is.
Yeah, it sounds so basic, right? I mean, it is. And
it does. It really does.
And again, I'll be critical on small departments. We can control that. Large departments, it can be difficult, but in small departments, we can control that. And I'll give you two more examples that just kind of, reinforce what you're saying is that, we've encouraged our company officers and battalion chiefs to do expectations for their people, and most of them do. The deputy that come in, he's like, yeah, that's going to be required now. Yeah, I want all of them. So if there's one or two or three are just not doing it, they're going to start doing it. But it plays into exactly what you said. It's because of exactly what you said. Secondary to that, we adopted 2 years ago what we call performance standards. And the performance standards are 3 primary functions that you do on the fire ground that every working fire you go to, you're going to do at least one of the 3. Masking up, second floor VES with a 24 extension ladder, and stretching a hose line to the door. And each one of those are timed events. So we spent 8 months of setting these events up so that they are consistent so the companies could go out and practice them. And all I did as a deputy chief is I collected the data for 7 or 8 months, put them in a spreadsheet, went to an officers meeting and said, okay, guys, here's the average time for masking up. Here's the average time for a single person stretch to the front door with these particular dynamics. And here's the time for a second floor VES. And we had talked a lot leading up to this. It wasn't just like, hey, we threw it on. This is why we want to do it. We want you, the captains, the company officers, the midline supervisors, arguably the most important leaders in the fire department's organization rank. We want you to determine what now will be Midway's high performance standards. Okay? Now, my job was to set it up so that they would buy off on it and to ensure that we had a reasonable standard, right? Because you got some guys that, masking up in eight seconds. They want an 8-second mask up. I mean, that's great, but we got to be realistic. We're not all that good,
Sure.
So we took it to a meeting and they narrowed down the numbers. Our average mask up time, I'll just give you an example, I think was 17 to 18 seconds, and we went from hardly anybody using gloves to everybody using gloves, and so the recommendation was 20 seconds. I said, well, guys, I tell you what. Let's not set ourselves up for a huge challenge. Let's do 25 seconds.
There you go.
That's plenty reasonable, super fast. So we did that with all 3, and now we're 2 years into it, and it's non-punitive. So one of the first questions that come up by a captain, he's like, hey, Chief, I got a question. I said, yeah. He goes, so I'm just going to ask it because people are thinking of it. I said, yeah. He goes, so what happens when we get to these and we start doing these and one of my guys doesn't hit the time mark? I said, man, Cap, that's a really good question. I said, but before I answer that question, this is exactly what I told him. I said, before I answer that question, I want to ask you a question. He goes, okay. I said, what are you going to do when one of your guys doesn't hit that time mark?
Yeah.
He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, what are you going to do? He goes, well, we're going to go train. I said, there's your answer. There is no punitive to this. This is a department cultural standard, and the first step in it is everybody in this room, all company officers, buy off and understand that seconds matter. There's a difference between a 20-second or 25 mask up time and a 45-second if it's your kid in there, right? Absolutely, Chief. That's it, guys. We're setting the high performance standards. We're going to review it several times a year. We're going to make sure everybody's on mark on it. We're going to make sure they're trained. And if they're not, we're going to give them the tools to do that. But if everybody buys off on it, a culture, it's not a test. It's an expectation we're just going to meet. Now, fast forward 2 years later, we just did one. The deputy just did one, I want to say a month ago. And it home run.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Because I still go to fires, and I've watched this evolve over 2 years. It's measurable, Jeremy. I'm telling you, it's probably one of the best things that we have done when it comes to performance on the fire ground that I explain to people that I'm just like, 2 things put this on my radar years ago. Ben Schultz down in West Palm talked about seconds. Scott Thompson talked about, well, everybody says they're great, but how do you define it?
Right.
So how you're going to define it for us is we're going to do what Ben and them do in West Palm, because again, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Ben, send me that stuff you guys do in West Palm. A neighboring fire chief used to work down there. He was familiar with it. We made it fit for us, and we did what we wanted to do. And now that we've done that 2 years, I'm telling you, man, I go to these fires, and I am so impressed. And this is we've adopted it South County wide, just not here in Midway. I mean, just the efficiency of the stretches and the mask up as an example, because obviously pretty much every fire we're doing that. We may not be VES in every fire, but we're doing that. I'm telling you, man, it is nothing short of amazing, because it just now is become a part of who we are and how we operate. It's not that, well, it's a test. It's like, if you're not meeting that, you're kind of like, who's this guy? Somebody needs to get him up to speed, you know?
Well, and that's what it is, right? They embrace one another. They want their guys to succeed. There's nothing better than in a winning culture. All they want is success for the next guy. And when you have a winning culture like that, winners win because they push each other to be better. And when you have a system in place that challenges your people to be better, you get that buy-in. And when you have that buy-in, 25 seconds, screw that. I'm under 20, right? Oh, you're going to be under 20? I'm going to get it in 18. And now you have that competition, and it's healthy competition. And what does it do? It makes you better, which makes your service better, which makes the community better. And there's nothing better than that. That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
You talked real quick about the other departments around you, and I know as a small department, you guys do a lot of automatic aid with the other smaller departments and so on. So it sounds like this has really taken hold, not just in your own department, but the departments around you, right? It's become a culture that has bled over into this region. Am I wrong?
No, you're right, and that's just another little story. We did something unique when I came here in 2020. They did a consolidation study. Long story short, there's 3 departments. The 2 main ones we run with, Navarre and Navarre Beach, they opted out of it. But my background was training and developing things like this, and I had just got hired, and the consolidation committee said, well, what do you think? I said, well, if we're not going to consolidate, coming from a very fractured system with different cultures that at times created a lot of unsafe conditions on the fire ground, I said the best thing you can do is what we've tried to do, sometimes successful, sometimes not successful, and where I came from is to create a unified operational front, which means starting out with standardizing equipment, standardizing hose loads, standardizing bundles, high-rise packs, target flows, creating joint training, and creating joint standard operating guidelines. Now, none of that was in place 5 years ago. We worked super hard. And after about 1.5 years in place, we got all these things in place. So now we operate what's called the South Santa Rosa Fire Alliance. Now here's the key to that. We had 3 fire chiefs, so it's much smaller, it's easy to manage, but all 3 fire chiefs at the time, my fire chief, the 2 chiefs in other departments, were 100% on board. They said, we want this to happen. And because of that mutual trust and respect amongst those fire chiefs, I know this is going to blow you away, but guess what happened each rank going down? Now the battalion chiefs started clicking, then the captains start clicking, then the firefighter. Now fast forward 5 years later, you can go and you can take there's 2 battalions that cover the south end of the county, one for our department, one for another. Battalion 40, which is the other department, can come into any of our firehouses any time of day, and the firefighters will welcome them. Hey, what's up, chief? Come on in. You want coffee? It's not like this, like, well, what's this chief doing here?
Right.
We've even taken it a step further. The second year into developing this, myself and another chief in Navarre Beach, who happens to be a good friend of mine that used to work in Fort Walton with me as a battalion chief, we had this idea of doing a gala, an annual gala. And there was 2 reasons we wanted to do it. 1, we wanted to breed camaraderie with the guys to interject the departments together. And 2, as chiefs, we wanted to give back. One time a year, we want them and their spouses to dress up, come out, get free drinks, get free dinner,
sure.
Have a good time. And we started doing that. We've done it for 4 years now. And that is another component that has just helped create that cohesiveness. Now, all of that going back to the performance standards, that's how South County wide that the guys are operating. I mean, if you pulled up and you watch the guys, you'd be like, oh, this is one department for sure. So,
Well, and that's what I love, because when you think about it, when you're holding each other these standards, and it doesn't matter across department lines, right? So when it's a regional cultural thing, and you work together on the fire ground, there's no more like, no, here comes that company, here comes that engine company from that city, right? Like, these guys are terrible, Like, there's none of that anymore, because you're holding. That's right. That's right. There's the same level of expectation of delivery of services and how they're going to perform on the fire ground, and understanding where they fit in on the fire ground, and their positioning and all that. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. And I love it, because a lot of times what gets in the way of that, Chief, and I'm sure you would agree, is ego.
Mm-hmm.
Just ego.
Yeah, So in Okaloosa, where I worked, in Fort Walton, I mean, there was a bunch of small departments, and a lot of them are pretty busy. But that was that. It was ego.
Yeah.
It was the Chiefs. That's why I said that if we didn't have the three chiefs over here that didn't mutually respect each other, and equally important, have a friendship with each other, I do not think we would be near as effective. But because of that trust, it's kind of like a parent setting the example. Because
Yeah.
of that, you start to see it trickle down. Like, I go into any firehouse in the south end of the county, and I enjoy going there. I feel welcomed, right? And that's because of this mutual aid partnership. And I jokingly tell guys, I'm like, I think we are the gold standard of a mutual aid partnership.
I love that.
And it's worked really, really well. Now the key is if we don't ever merge, which has been on the talks for years now, who knows?
That was,
may or may
that
not
was
happen
my
at some
next
point.
question. Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
Yep.
I mean, it should. I mean, it really should, but it just hasn't. But the question is if it don't, like, can each chief, as they move into positions, keep this going? And like one of our challenges here is succession planning, putting the right people in the right places. So I can guarantee you, the guy that takes my position when I retire, he will be the right person to ensure that at least on our end, that environment remains. And I believe the other chiefs of the other departments, if we don't end up merging at some point, I believe they're going to do the same thing. And I think we're very lucky to have that here, because of my experiences of 3 decades doing this, it just does not seem to be that common, And the guys, a lot of the younger guys, they don't know how good they got it, and that's cool too, because this is all they know.
Right?
But if they go to work in some of the other counties, they'd be like, "What is going on here?" I mean,
You only know what you know, and a lot of the baggage of years ago for these new kids, they don't know it, they don't understand it, and all they know is what they see when they come in the door, and that to me is the win, right? When your next generation's coming in and all they know is where you are today, that's a beautiful thing, because now they're only going to take it from here and go further. And I love that. Keep pushing it forward. But I think, kind of to wrap a little bit, Chief, we started this whole thing about you and the position you're in today, but just hearing your journey and where you are today, the excitement coming out of you about what you've been able to do in your region, there's really, that's the reason why you are where you are today. And if not you, then who? And I truly believe that the Midway Fire Department in the area of the Panhandle where you are, you guys are making great strides and making a huge impact. And I thank you today. I know how busy you are, so to grab an hour or a little bit more than an hour with you today has just been awesome. And it's just nice to get to know a little bit more about your story and have a great conversation. So I truly, truly thank you for joining me today. This was awesome.
Yeah, man, it was my pleasure. It was a great timing too, because we're right in the middle of budget season, so to have a nice little couple-hour break before I go into a budget meeting this afternoon.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice little rejuvenating thing. But no, thank you so much, man. Like this has been, the career has been so special to me, and I'm so lucky to work where I'm at now. And I couldn't tell you how proud I am of this organization and the south end of the county of Navarre Beach, and what we've done here. I'm just lucky to spend the last 5 years doing what I love to do, working with some amazing people. So, and get an opportunity to talk to you and guys like yourself, man. And thank you so much for having me on. I told you before we started, I was a huge fan of all your stuff, and for years I was hoping you were going to ask me to jump on and talk to you. So thanks, man. I appreciate that.
This has been a real treat, and I appreciate you being here. I really, really do. And thank you. So, and with that, hang right here. I'm going to sign off, and thank you for the kind words. It's awesome. It means the world. So
appreciate it.
Hang right here, Chief. I'm going to sign off. I'll come right back to you, okay?
Okay.
Everyone, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. What an incredible conversation. I got pages and pages of notes and timestamps on this one, man. This has been really good. Chief Stone knocked it out of the park, as I figured he would. I challenge you this. It's about the person, not the qualifications. I think if anything comes out of this episode today, it's what it's truly all about. We talked about getting the right people on the bus. I agree, but let's get them in the right seats and push our organizations forward. And Chief Stone and what he's doing down in Florida certainly is making a tremendous impact on a lot of people and their love for the fire service. So, like I say at the end of every episode, take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse and talk about it, because when we're talking about the job, we're making the job better. I'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire